Hi, I'm Nick Salazar with TryRig.com, and this is our review of the Kinetic Rock and Roll Trainer. The Rock and Roll is essentially like other fixed-wheel trainers, but adds a novel suspension mechanism that gives the rider some freedom of movement in all directions. The trainer has a very large base to account for the extra instability introduced by this mechanism. The big footprint works well, and the trainer is quite stable, but it'll require a little more room than your standard trainer, so beware of that. There are a couple of elastomers sandwiched between metal plates, which are then secured with some big carriage bolts. This mechanism allows the resistance unit and your bike to float to some degree. The amount of float you get is determined by how tight you set those carriage bolts, which means that it's user tunable. If you want the unit a little stiffer, just tighten the bolts, and vice versa. Kinetic has been in the trainer business for many years, and they make what we consider to be the best fluid resistance unit on the market, which uses magnetically coupled silicone-filled chambers to provide excellent resistance without any chance of a leak. The Rock and Roll Trainer uses this top-of-the-line resistance unit, which makes for very smooth pedaling, especially when coupled with the large flywheel. So does the Rock and Roll mechanism really work? Absolutely. The effect of the suspension is actually easier to see when you're standing up and throwing the bike around. But really, the big benefit to the Rock and Roll Trainer is actually the subtle suspension along the central plane of the bike. That movement is a little harder to see, and at first glance you might assume it's a bad thing. But this fore and aft and up and down motion would normally be absorbed by the rider, and the suspension mechanism makes for a much more comfortable training ride. Taking that strain out of your body makes the ride less fatiguing and ultimately more enjoyable. You can reduce the amount of motion that you see with a smoother pedal stroke, but for those of us that don't have perfect pedal strokes, the Rock and Roll Trainer is a godsend. Kinetic also cites some core strength benefits to having to keep yourself upright on the trainer, and perhaps that's true, but depending on how tight you set the elastomers, you might not experience it. If you add Kinetic's turntable riser though, you'll definitely exert some energy balancing on the trainer. Ultimately, we preferred using a fixed riser most of the time. In the end, this trainer is a monster. It combines Kurt's tried and true resistance technology and build quality with some pretty cool new tech that actually works. The downsides? Well, it's much bigger and heavier than other trainers, making it a poor choice if you want to travel to a race with it. And at $589 retail, it's the most expensive fixed gear trainer we know of, other than something like a CompuTrainer. It's also the only trainer that provides this level of comfort. And so ultimately, if that gets your butt off the couch more often during the winter, isn't that worth the cost? For more info and photos, tune in to TryRig.com. Thanks.